Hello, in today's video, I'm going to be telling you how to counter this little funny guy behind me in War Tycoon, the LOSAT. And in today's video, I'm going to be giving you some methods to counter this funny little guy. This silly little goober. As you might see on screen, he's a silly little guy. And if you think that, you're correct. It's pretty silly. It's very tiny. It has no armor, actually. The armor on it is like 100 to 30 millimeters. And yet it can survive stuff it should not be able to. It has extremely high health in War Tycoon, even though it should have really, really bad health. So I'm going to be giving you some methods to counter this wildly overpowered tank for what it actually should be in War Tycoon. So yeah, let's get into the video. And so the first way to counter the LOSAT brings us to the main Tycoon. And you don't even need a single rebirth. No. And so the first way to counter the LOSAT brings us to the main Tycoon. And you don't even need a single rebirth to get this item. And so if you come up to the top floor, you can buy this guy right here, and he unlocks tasks. War operations in the soldier category. This is where you can get the javelin from Operation Rocketeer. All it requires you to do is destroy 25 enemy vehicles with an RPG. I highly recommend grinding this out with a friend. It's really easy and simple to do it that way. Otherwise, it can take a solid chunk of time. But so, what does the javelin do? Well, here is the javelin, and the javelin, it locks onto vehicles. But for all that we care, it can be countered in a few ways. The first way is if the vehicle has a smoke screen. You can click Q and it deploys some smoke, and so the javelin is no longer able to lock on and fire. The LOSAT does not have that. Otherwise, a missile disruption system, which only the T90 has, and by looking in the general direction and at the missile, or the javelin in this case, it will disrupt it and it'll go haywire and fly off in a random direction generally. And the final method, the only one the LOSAT is able to use actually, would be hiding in cover. For instance, if I give myself fly real quick, if I go all the way over here, if you were to destroy someone's shed, the fuse box for it, now you could drive your LOSAT in here and take cover in here. And that's the only thing that the LOSAT can do for cover, really, generally. And so, the prime way that I find to counter the LOSAT with a javelin would just be, and I highly recommend doing this, is up on a Tycoon, go over here, and shoot at it. And if I am not mistaken, you might be able to actually get up here. Yep, you can get up here. And up here, the LOSAT, it has kinetic missiles, which means they're not explosive, really. They don't have a large area of effect, so you're generally safe up here from the LOSAT. If it's coming from over there, or like a distance where it can see you really well, well, you have to get down. But generally, yes, having a high cover or vantage point is going to be a really good counter to the LOSAT as long as you have a javelin with you. And that is the first method to counter the LOSAT. And so let's move on to the next one. The next method I found helpful would be over here at the helicopters and planes. Mostly planes, but helicopters do work. Some helicopters like the Mi-24 and Mi-28 Havoc are pretty good examples, as they have lock-on missiles for ground, and the Havoc does only... And so the next method would just be lock-on missiles, but not the javelin. We're talking helicopters like the Mi-24 Hind, Mi-28 Havoc, Eurocopter Apache, and I believe that's it besides the Invictus. But the Invictus doesn't have the greatest damage. So Mi-24, Mi-28, Eurocopter Tiger, and AH-64 Apache are all pretty good because of their lock-ons. And if you go up high enough in the sky, the LOSAT isn't going to be able to hit you that well. It's going to struggle hitting you. And so that's a really good method to counter the LOSAT. Next up, we have the planes. And to start, the Spitfire and Stuka, they're pretty good. The Stuka can one-tap if you hit the LOSAT correctly, and the Spitfire has an extremely high firepower. You want to fly very high up, come down, and smite the LOSAT with a ton of firepower. And then we have stuff like the F-14, Harrier 2, and F-35 Lightning, all with lock-on missiles, which can lock onto anything. And so the Harrier and F-14 are going to be really good for just kamikazes, generally. Or you lock on, you fire all your missiles, and you just let them do crazy damage to the LOSAT. And F-35 is also included in this category. And so yeah, those would be all of the second method, which the second method is just use aircraft and fly up really high to abuse the very high skybox against the LOSAT. And so, let's move on to the third method. The third and final method, probably the best, if not for the javelin, brings us here. And it brings us to the T-90 and Abrams X. The T-90 has a missile disruption system, which means at a long enough distance and long enough range, the LOSAT can't even hit you. As long as you look at the missiles, the LOSAT basically can't land a hit on you besides its machine gun. And so the T-90, that makes it exceptionally good against the LOSAT. Same goes for against the ADATs and Bradley and Javelins, because it can just disrupt the missiles, and the missiles won't land on the T-90. And then we have the Abrams X. The Abrams X has a javelin, which lets you kind of use it as a radar, so you know where the, well, LOSAT is, and then you could fight the LOSAT with an ambush, and you get an extra hit off on the LOSAT generally, even though there's a good chance that you'll still die to the LOSAT if the LOSAT's good enough and swings around quick enough and starts destroying you with its funny kinetic missiles, which do not the greatest damage, but there's so many of them that they will kill you really quickly. So yeah, I recommend the T-90. It's a really good way. Abrams X, I'd recommend that second to T-90, because T-90, it's not pay to win. Abrams X is. And so yeah, that's all the ways to counter the LOSAT. But remember, the best way to counter the LOSAT is not to fight the LOSAT, or fight the LOSAT with a LOSAT, because the LOSAT is overpowered. It is incredibly overpowered and broken. It should have no armor and no health generally, but it has health, even though it has no armor actually, really. So yeah, that would be today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a good day.